Hey everyone, welcome back. I bet you've looked at a food label and just felt like, what is this even saying?
Yeah, they can be pretty overwhelming.
Yeah, right. So we're doing a deep dive today on this YouTube video by Dr. Eric Berg, and the video is called Four Common Ingredients That Will Kill You.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and, before everyone freaks out, we're not saying that, these ingredients are gonna, immediately make you keel over.
Right.
But Dr. Berg really breaks down why we should be paying attention to these four very common ingredients.
Absolutely.
So basically, he says that most people, they want to eat healthier, but they're confused, right? By all this stuff on the nutrition labels. It's expensive to eat healthy, and the labels are just confusing.
Yeah, and it's, like you said, it can be really overwhelming, and it's hard to even know where to start sometimes.
And so Dr. Berg makes this really interesting analogy about food labels.
Okay.
He says it's like reading a foreign language. Have you ever felt that way?
Oh, yeah, definitely. There's so many times where I'm just like, what is this? I don't even know where to start.
Yeah, exactly. It's
Yeah.
like you need a chemistry degree to understand half of these ingredients.
That's a good point.
And he uses some examples in the video like hydroxypropyl distarch phosphate.
Wow. Yeah, that's a mouthful.
Right. What even is that?
I have no idea.
And then he says intrasterified soybean oil.
Okay, so that one sounds a little more familiar, but still, what does that actually mean?
Right. It's like they're speaking a different language on purpose.
That's interesting.
So do you think there's any truth to this idea that the food industry is kind of intentionally being confusing?
You know, I think it definitely raises some questions about transparency.
Yeah.
You know, why not use language that people can actually understand?
Exactly, like plain English.
Right. What are they trying to hide?
And he goes on to say that the junk food industry, deliberately works very hard to make these processed foods a normal part of our diet. And he kind of makes this really interesting point about how we've been led to believe that all calories are created equal.
Right.
But he says that's not true. And he uses this example of fructose in fruit versus high fructose corn syrup.
Okay. Yeah, I've heard that comparison before.
So why is that? Why are those not the same?
Well, it all comes down to how our bodies process these different types of sugar.
Okay.
So when you eat a piece of fruit, you're getting fructose, but you're also getting fiber and all these other nutrients that slow down the absorption of that sugar. But with high fructose corn syrup, it's like this highly refined, concentrated form of sugar.
Okay.
There's no fiber. There's no nutrients to slow it down, so it hits your system really fast.
It's like a sugar bomb.
Basically, yeah. And that can lead to all sorts of problems.
Okay, so it's not just about counting calories.
No, not at all.
It's about where those calories are coming from and what else they're packaged with.
Exactly.
And that's why Dr. Berg says we should really be focusing on the ingredients list, not just the nutrition facts.
Makes sense.
So when we're looking at that ingredients list, what are some of the things that should send up a red flag?
Well, Dr. Berg highlights four main culprits that he believes can really be detrimental to our health.
Okay.
Synthetic sugars, synthetic starches, seed oils, and then processed proteins.
Okay, so let's start with the synthetic sugars.
Okay.
So what makes them different from the sugars that are found naturally in fruits and vegetables?
So natural sugars are found in whole foods like fruits, vegetables, even dairy products.
Right.
And they're part of a complex matrix of nutrients and fiber that your body can process and utilize effectively.
Okay.
But synthetic sugars are basically chemically manufactured. They're often added to foods where you might not expect them, like savory snacks, sauces, even things that are marketed as healthy.
Oh, wow. I didn't realize they were in that many things.
Yeah, they're really sneaky.
So what is it about them that makes them so bad for us?
Well, consuming large amounts of these synthetic sugars is linked to a whole host of health problems.
Like what?
Well, weight gain, blood sugar spikes, increased risk of heart disease, some types of cancer.
Wow.
And one of the big issues is that they're often hidden under a bunch of different names on the ingredients list.
Oh, so it's not as simple as just looking for the word sugar.
Right. It's not that easy.
So we have to be like detectives.
Exactly. Got to look for those sneaky aliases.
So what are some of the names that we should be watching out for?
Ooh, things like dextrose, maltodextrin, corn syrup solids.
Okay.
And then there are all these different types of sugar alcohols.
Oh.
It's like a whole secret language of sweeteners.
Okay, so synthetic sugars, that's the first one on Dr. Berg's hit list. What about these synthetic starches?
Okay.
How are they different from the starches that we get from whole foods, like, vegetables and things like that?
So think of natural starches, like the ones you find in vegetables, as like a slow-burning fuel for your body.
Okay.
They come packaged with fiber and nutrients that help regulate how they're digested and absorbed.
Yep.
But synthetic starches, they're often stripped of all those beneficial components during processing. So they're basically fast-burning fuel that can send your blood sugar soaring.
So it's not just the type of starch.
Right.
It's the form it comes in.
Exactly. It's all about the context.
Okay, that makes sense. Now I'm really curious about these seed oils.
Yeah.
Because I know that there's a lot of talk about how certain oils can be good for us.
Right.
So what's the deal with seed oils specifically?
So it's true, some oils can be very beneficial.
Right, like olive oil.
Exactly. Olive oil, avocado oil.
Those are good.
Those are great for you. But seed oils like corn oil, soybean oil, sunflower oil, they're often highly processed.
Okay.
And they contain a really high ratio of omega-6 fatty acids.
Yeah.
And while we do need some omega-6s in our diet, an overabundance of them, especially when it's not balanced with enough omega-3s, can contribute to inflammation in the body.
And inflammation is kind of at the root of so many HISI problems.
Sure.
Right?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Chronic inflammation is linked to everything from heart disease and arthritis to certain types of cancer, even mental health issues.
Wow.
It's a big deal.
So it's not that all seed oils are bad.
No, not inherently.
It's about how much we're consuming.
Right. And the types we're choosing.
Okay, what about processed proteins?
Okay.
Because he specifically called out soy protein isolates casein and wheat gluten.
Yes. So those are often found in protein powders, processed meats, and other packaged foods.
Okay.
And one of the concerns with soy protein isolates is that they're often extracted using a solvent called hexane.
And hexane is?
It's a chemical solvent.
Okay.
And it can leave residues in the final product.
Which I'm guessing we don't want to be ingesting.
Really? Not ideal.
And then what about casein?
So casein is a milk protein.
Okay.
And there's concern about the A1 beta casein that's found in a lot of conventional dairy products.
Okay.
And some research suggests that this type of casein may be harder to digest for some people. And it could also contribute to inflammation.
So it seems like what Dr. Berg is really advocating for is this like back to basics approach to eating.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to put it.
Like choosing whole unprocessed foods as much as possible.
Exactly. He's essentially saying the more we can move away from packaged processed foods and closer to whole natural foods, the better off we'll be.
It's all about understanding what our bodies truly need to thrive.
Absolutely.
And I know that a lot of our listeners are probably thinking, okay, this is all great information, but how do I actually put this into practice?
Right.
And I know that in the video, Dr. Berg talks about this wallet-sized card that he has.
Yes.
That has all the different names for these like potentially harmful ingredients. What do you think about that as a tool?
I think it's a brilliant idea.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like having a cheat sheet right there in your pocket.
Exactly.
To help you make those quick decisions at the grocery store.
Because sometimes you're just standing there and you're like overwhelmed.
Oh, totally.
There are so many options.
Yeah.
And it's hard to remember all of this.
Right. You don't want to be stuck there trying to decipher every single ingredient list.
So you can quickly scan for these key culprits.
Exactly. It's like a little secret weapon.
So it's about empowering ourselves.
Absolutely.
To take control of our health one grocery trip at a time.
That's a great way to put it.
So we've covered a lot of ground here.
We have.
We've learned about Dr. Berg's 4 key ingredients to watch out for: synthetic sugars, synthetic starches, seed oils, and processed proteins.
Right.
We've talked about why they can be so detrimental to our health. And we've explored some practical strategies for avoiding them.
Exactly.
What's the one key message that you hope our listeners will take away from this deep dive?
I think the most important thing is to remember that knowledge is power. By simply being aware of these ingredients and understanding their potential impact, you're already taking a huge step towards improving your health.
It's about becoming more mindful.
Absolutely.
Of what we're putting into our bodies and making choices that support our well-being.
Exactly. And remember, this is not about creating fear or guilt around food.
Right.
It's about empowering ourselves to make informed decisions and to enjoy a wide variety of delicious, healthy foods.
We've talked a lot about the potential negative impacts of certain ingredients.
Right.
I'm wondering if you can leave our listeners with some positive food choices to focus on.
Oh, sure.
What are some things that we should be adding to our diets to support our overall health and well-being?
Well, I think a good place to start is by focusing on whole, unprocessed foods as much as possible.
Like?
Fruits, vegetables, whole grains, legumes, nuts, and seeds.
Okay.
These foods are packed with nutrients, fiber, antioxidants that support our bodies in countless ways.
It's like going back to the basics.
Exactly, nourishing ourselves with foods that are as close to their natural state as possible.
Awesome. And when it comes to protein, what are some good sources?
So aim for a variety of sources, like lean meats, poultry, fish, eggs, and plant-based options like beans, lentils, and tofu.
Okay.
And don't forget about healthy fats.
Yeah, those are important.
Things like olive oil, avocados, fatty fish are great for heart health and brain function.
So it's really about creating a balanced and diverse plate.
Absolutely.
Filled with a rainbow of colors and a variety of textures.
Exactly. And remember, eating healthy doesn't have to be restrictive or boring.
Right.
There are so many delicious and satisfying ways to nourish your body.
Uh-huh.
It's all about finding what works for you and making gradual, sustainable changes over time.
It's like a culinary adventure.
I love that.
Exploring new flavors and ingredients and discovering what makes you feel your best.
Absolutely.
So as we wrap up our deep dive into Dr. Berg's 4 common ingredients that will kill you, what's one thing you hope our listeners will take away from this conversation?
I think the most important message is that we have more control over our health than we often realize. By becoming aware of the potential pitfalls that are lurking in our food supply and making conscious choices about what we eat, we can take proactive steps to support our well-being.
It's about becoming empowered, informed consumers.
Exactly.
Decoding those labels and making choices that align with our health goals.
Absolutely.
And remember, Dr. Berg's wallet card can be a really handy tool to help you navigate those tricky ingredient lists.
It's like having a secret weapon in your back pocket.
So to our listeners, as you head out on your next grocery shopping trip, keep those 4 key culprits in mind: synthetic sugars, synthetic starches, seed oils, and processed proteins. Be a label detective, make informed choices, and most importantly, enjoy the journey of nourishing your body with delicious, healthy foods.
That's great advice.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
My pleasure. They're kind of like that fast-burning fuel that can send your blood sugar like way up.
So it's not just the type of starch, it's the form it comes in.
Yes, exactly.
Okay, that makes sense. Now I'm curious about these seed oils. Because, we always hear that certain oils are good for us.
Right.
So what's the issue with seed oils in particular?
Well, some oils can be good for you.
Right, like olive oil.
Exactly, olive oil, avocado oil. But seed oils like corn oil, soybean oil, sunflower oil, they're often highly processed, and they have a really high ratio of those omega-6 fatty acids.
And we need some of those.
We do need some, but when we have too many of them, especially without enough omega-3s to balance it out, that's when it can lead to inflammation.
And inflammation is linked to like every health problem, right?
Pretty much. Yeah. Chronic inflammation is linked to heart disease, arthritis, certain types of cancer, even mental health issues.
Wow.
It's pretty serious.
So it's not that all seed oils are like inherently bad. It's just how much we're consuming.
All right. The types.
Okay. Now what about processed proteins?
Okay.
He specifically called out soy protein, isolates casein, and wheat gluten.
Yeah, those are the big ones. And they show up in things like protein powders, processed meats, and other packaged foods.
Okay.
And the problem with soy protein isolate is that it's extracted with a solvent called hexane.
And what is that?
It's a chemical solvent.
Okay.
And it can leave residues in the soy protein.
And I'm assuming that's not good for us.
No, not really.
Okay. And then what about casein?
So casein is a milk protein. And there's this thing called A1 beta casein.
Okay.
That's in a lot of conventional dairy products.
Right.
And some research suggests that this type of casein is hard for some people to digest.
Okay.
And it can contribute to inflammation.
So it seems like what Dr. Berg is saying is that we should just try to eat like real food.
Yeah, I think that's a great way to summarize it.
Choosing whole, unprocessed foods.
Exactly. The more we can eat foods that are close to their natural state, the better.
Because our bodies know what to do with that.
Right, so what we're designed to eat.
And I know that a lot of people are probably thinking, okay, this is great, but how do I actually do this?
Yeah, it can be overwhelming.
And Dr. Berg actually has this wallet-sized card with all the different names for these ingredients. What do you think about that as a tool?
I think it's super helpful.
Yeah.
Yeah, because you can take it with you to the grocery store.
Right.
And it's like a quick reference guide.
You don't have to stand there and try to remember everything.
Right, because sometimes you just forget.
Totally.
So you just pull out the card and be like, okay, is this on the list?
It's like giving yourself that little extra support.
Exactly.
So we've talked about Dr. Berg's 4 key ingredients.
Right.
Synthetic sugars, synthetic starches, seed oils, processed proteins.
Yep.
We've talked about why they can be harmful,
Uh-huh.
and we've given some practical tips for avoiding them.
Right.
What is the one thing you would want our listeners to remember from this whole conversation?
I would say the biggest takeaway is that knowledge is power. Even just knowing about these ingredients and how they might impact your health is a huge step in the right direction.
Yeah, it's about becoming more mindful of what we're putting into our bodies.
Exactly.
And making choices that actually support our health.
Absolutely. And I just want to reiterate that this isn't about being afraid of food.
Right.
It's about enjoying a variety of delicious, healthy foods.
Absolutely. So we've talked about all the things to avoid.
Yeah.
But what are some things that we should be adding to our diets?
Okay. Well, the best place to start is by focusing on whole, unprocessed foods.
Like
Fruits, vegetables, whole grains,
Okay.
legumes, nuts, seeds.
Those are the good guys.
Yeah, they're packed with nutrients. Fiber, antioxidants.
It's about getting back to basics.
Exactly. Eating foods in their most natural state.
And what about protein?
You want to aim for a variety of protein sources.
Okay.
Like lean meats, poultry, fish, eggs, and plant-based options like beans, lentils, tofu.
And we can't forget about healthy fats.
Of course, those are important too. Things like olive oil, avocados, and fatty fish are great for your heart and your brain.
So it's about creating a balanced plate with lots of different colors and textures.
Exactly. And remember, eating healthy doesn't have to be boring.
Right.
There are so many delicious and satisfying ways to nourish your body.
It really is.
It's all about finding what works for you and making those changes gradually.
It's like a culinary adventure.
I love that.
Exploring new flavors and ingredients and figuring out what makes you feel your best.
Exactly. You got it.
So as we wrap up our deep dive into Dr. Berg's 4 common ingredients that will kill you,
Right.
what's the one thing you hope our listeners will take away from this?
I think the most important message is that we have more control over our health than we think. By being aware of what's in our food and making conscious choices about what we eat, we can really take care of ourselves.
It's about being an empowered consumer,
Absolutely.
decoding those labels, and making choices that support our health goals.
You got it.
And remember, Dr. Berg's wallet card can be a great tool to help you navigate those tricky ingredient lists.
It's like your secret weapon at the grocery store.
To our listeners, as you head out on your next grocery shopping trip, keep those 4 key culprits in mind: synthetic sugars, synthetic starches, seed oils, and processed proteins. Be a label detective, make informed choices, and most importantly, enjoy the journey of nourishing your body with delicious, healthy foods. I love that. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
My pleasure. I think a good place to start is just by focusing on those whole, unprocessed foods as much as possible.
Okay.
Think about things like fruits, vegetables, whole grains, legumes,
Right.
nut seeds, all of that good stuff.
It's like going back to basics.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Just nourishing ourselves with foods that are as close to their natural state as possible.
And what about when it comes to protein?
So aim for a variety of sources: lean meats, poultry, fish, eggs, and then also think about plant-based options too,
Okay.
like beans, lentils, and tofu.
And we can't forget about those healthy fats.
Of course.
Right.
We need those too.
Yeah. What are some good examples?
Things like olive oil, avocados, fatty fish,
It's okay.
all great for your heart and your brain.
So it's about creating that balanced plate
Yes.
with lots of color, lots of texture.
Absolutely. And remember, eating healthy doesn't have to be boring.
Right.
There are so many delicious and satisfying ways to nourish your body.
It's all about finding what works for you.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And, making those changes gradually over time.
It's like a culinary adventure.
I love that.
Exploring new flavors, new ingredients,
Yeah.
discovering what makes you feel your best.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So as we wrap up our deep dive on these 4 common ingredients from Dr. Berg's video,
What's the one thing you really want our listeners to remember?
I think the biggest takeaway from all of this is that we have so much more control over our health than we realize. And by being aware of, what's in our food, what we're putting into our bodies, making those conscious choices, we can really take those proactive steps to support our well-being.
It's about being an empowered consumer, decoding those labels, making choices that align with our goals.
Absolutely.
And remember, Dr. Berg's wallet card can be a really helpful tool
It can be.
for navigating all of those tricky ingredient lists.
It's like a little cheat sheet right there in your pocket.
So, to our listeners, as you're heading out on that next grocery shopping trip, keep those 4 culprits in mind. the synthetic sugars, the synthetic starches, the seed oils, and the processed proteins. Be a label detective, make informed choices, and most importantly, enjoy the journey of nourishing your body with all those delicious, healthy foods.
That's great advice.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
It was my pleasure.